Those of us that receive mail electronically about Exotica Nursery, and Steve Strangler is here tonight. And as you know, Exotica Nursery is a great asset for us here in San Diego County. And unfortunately, it's run into some hard times again right now. And there is a chance that we may lose that asset. So Steve, if you could come on up, and he's going to talk a little bit. Maybe there's something that we can do as a partnership, our club and Exotica Nursery. You know, we're welcome to some ideas here because we definitely don't want to lose an asset like that. Steve, when did you found Exotica Nursery?
Well, I moved from Hollywood in 1982.
So, 82, that's what, almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
Go ahead and use the mic there.
Well, some of you visited our nursery in Vista, California. That goes way back when Frida Kaplan helped support us, and personal friends with Paul Thompson and all. Paul kept on telling me in the past, you need to buy your own property. And I always wanted to get his place, but he leased it to someone else, and then it was eventually lost. A beautiful collection of mangoes and lychees and stuff. So this backfield that I leased it was a vacant piece of lot. I moved on to it in 1984. I've got pictures of it. There's now over about 1,200 plants in the ground. There's lychees, there's mangoes, there's long ends, there's all the varieties of pomegranates from Wolfskill, and many fruits. But so I'm attempting. I have an opportunity now. I've been given 8 months to either catch up in the back rent or purchase the back field, which is $345,000. It might sound like a lot, but we've had the plants appraised at well over $1 million to replace them. And I thought, ideally, I know the California Rare Fruit Growers has been wanting to have a growing ground, and I guess you tried an effort at Fullerton Arboretum and in the San Diego Zoo, and that, I guess that never really worked out. But on this piece of property, I have well over 1,200 varieties, and I'd like to offer that to the rare fruit growers, that maybe as a group effort, you can purchase that, and it can become a future stock material for your sales, and I continue maintaining it, and the whole idea is to save 20 years plus of work that's gone into it and develop a mail order, and so that's what I'm asking to present to the rare fruit growers. Maybe you can bring that up in your council meetings later on as an opportunity to actually have a piece of property that will be owned by the rare fruit growers. It's a future park. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, hopefully we can come to some agreement and work something out on that. Right now, we do have a nominating committee that has been headed by David Long, and he's put countless hours into it this year, and I want to say that we really appreciate that. If you could come up, David, and make a presentation of the nominees and things like that. Go ahead and use the mic.
I would like to thank the nominating committee who worked diligently on getting this taken care of. Keith Harold, Harazan, Ron, Ed Hamilton, myself, and Rolf. Anyways, they've done a great job trying to work together to bring you good candidates, and we try to do this in a very transparent way so that people would know who they were looking at and that the membership would have a good choice of people to vote for. We had 2 people who decided to withdraw. David, for personal reasons, felt that it was best to allow the chair to pass on to a new person, and he's still going to be the ex officio. And then David Silverstein decided that just for internal peace and family happiness, he was going to just attend the meetings and be more involved with us, and I can respect that. Having gone through this, I never knew what I was getting into. But anyways, at this point, what I want to do is call up the candidates who are right now selected, and then I'm going to ask for some nominations from the floor. For chair, I'd like to have Tom Del Hotel come up, please.
Thank you.
And then for vice chair, Jim Neitzel. For secretary, Cielo Croft. Both?
Yeah, like
Cielo.
both.
And then also for treasury, we have Joy Bladicus, but she's still in the back qualifying the members as they come through. So this is who the nominating committee has picked, and they've been qualified pretty well. They've done a great job, and they would be excellent candidates to have. So at this point, I want to open this up again to any nominations from the floor. Barbara?
I'd like to nominate Mark Ben Dixon for secretary.
Okay, is there a second on that? Okay, the second is by, I heard the voice. Dick Snow, okay. So, I don't know if anybody's taking notes on this. I'm sorry?
Is Mark here? Did he agree?
Mark, do you agree?
Yes, I do.
Okay, what I would like, please come on up. I mean, if you're going to be part of the show, you got to get up here and dance. Okay, is there any other nominations? Oh, I can't see through all the hands that are up. Okay, what I would like to do is, since there's secretary and secretary, I'd like Mark to give about 2 minutes talk of who he is and what he expects that he can do and what his qualifications are. Mark, why don't you come over here and use the microphone?
Hi, my name is Mark Ben Dixon. I'm a San Diego native. I manage 3 farmers markets in San Diego that I've managed for the last 18 years. Taking care of all the bookwork, dealing with the government, the health department, whatever else that needs to be to run a successful farmers markets. I was in the Cedar Fire 6 years ago, and I'm currently rebuilding my house. The insurance money was not enough, so I had to do it myself. My background is a builder and farmer. Farm in East El Cajon area, and then I do have some property down in El Centro that I farm, large piece of ground. So I think I'm very well qualified to be secretary for the CRFG. If anybody has any questions? That's it? Oh.
What do you grow?
A little bit of everything, a lot of exotic macadamias, figs, bananas, avocados, and then down in the desert, alfalfa, wheat, asparagus, and mixed vegetables. All certified organic. I'm a California certified organic farmer, CCOF. That's it.
Okay, and since this is a contested position, I would like Cielo Foth
Yeah.
to come up and give a 2-minute dissertation.
That'll be a long one.
Oh, 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Cielo Foth, and I'm an insurance broker and a notary public. What I bring to this club, to this Nutty Fruit Club, is a wealth of organizational skills. I have excellent project management skills. I'm timely, very organized, and I do a lot of emails. I do a lot of Excel and a lot of Word documents. So I am technically savvy, and as far as writing and documenting what goes on at board meetings and general meetings, I think it is very important that the general membership is aware and what's going on, and what is important that the chapter needs to be involved. And currently, there has not been any documentation of what is going on in board meetings. And what I bring is transparency to the board and to the general membership. This way, when the board members bring something to the general membership, they are well aware of what's going on, and then you can make an educated decision as to what is best for the club. Because it takes more than just a few people here to run this club. Someone says that it takes a village to run, you know, a family. It really does, yeah, to raise a child. There's a lot of children among us. And so it does take a lot of community effort to make this place run smoothly. And I am motivated to run because of Tom and Jim Neitzel. And I would really like to work with them and ensure a very smooth transition from the current board and then moving on forward and making this place a happier, more friendly place that people can be welcome. Thank you.
Tom, Jim, since you were left out of the speech, if you guys would like to speak a couple words? 2 minutes. 1 minute, since there's nobody here running against you.
Just to tell people who you are.
I'm going to tell people who I am.
Yeah. You don't even need the speaker.
Most of you know me. I'm a fruit grower for a long time and past president of the organization. I feel like I think my coming back and taking this position, if I'm elected, we'll just have a lot more fun. You know, the organization was built on participation, on sharing, on enjoying the things we all enjoy. And I hope that I can bring us back to that with a good group and with participation from all of you. So I've become really thankful for a lot of things in the past few years. This group is one of them, and I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. I don't have much more to say.
For a minute, speak a few words.
Okay, I've been with the San Diego chapter of CRFG before there was one, because we started out with just a group of local people visiting one another's homes and gardens and having some goodies at one of them and knowing everybody very closely and very friendly relationship. Visiting gardens, I think, is really a lot of fun. And the new members especially, I think, need a little bit more TLC in that regard. People working with them to seed their gardens and see other people's gardens, help them out with any questions they have and so forth. Anyhow, I headed the local group that later developed into the San Diego chapter for about 5 years, and then the San Diego chapter blossomed into about 22 chapters, I think, at the highest point.
Okay, I think without further ado, if we could make sure that all the ballots are passed around so that everybody who gets a chance to vote gets. And I'm sorry? Okay. Claire would also like to say a few words. Once the ballots are cast, they're going to be counted by Barry, Dick Snow, and Aaron St. John. So, Claire?
Hi, a lot of you know me, some of you don't, but I used to be the chair back in the 90s, maybe? Anyway, I just wrote something that I wanted to get in the ballot qualities you would like to see in your officers. There are 4 that stand out for me, with the first being a devotion to CRFG. That would preclude anyone from abusing their office for personal gain. Then leadership skills, social skills, and the ability to perform the tasks required. Leadership involves taking charge and delegating, making decisions and following through, hearing all sides and then working towards consensus. Social skills should include being a team player, encouraging volunteer activities, promoting CRFG throughout the community, since our mission is to spread the word about rare fruit, building the group cohesion that has been missing. And technical ability should include education or experience for the position, including use of equipment, knowledge of the law, and or the ability to learn. Think hard before you make your decisions, and we will have a much happier and productive family.
Thank you.
Okay, while they are passing out the ballots, hopefully there's extra pens and pencils. Oh, please.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that since we do have one candidate on the floor, to speed up the process of voting, can we note Mark as Mark? And any other write-in candidate, please put their first name and their last name. So if you do select Mark, just put Mark. If there's anyone else. Well, I wouldn't do it since I'm able to do it.
Yeah, why don't you let us?
Okay, if you can do that, that's easy.
Capable.
Okay, I thought it was gonna go right. Never mind.
Okay, so there is no write-in for this. It's all going to be put onto the, I guess they're furiously writing back there. So at some point, they're going to be passing out the ballots. Please vote vote for who's going to really carry our chapter and do the job to bring it to where we want it to go, the direction we'd like. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry.
Was there a move that if there was only one candidate, just either approve it or disapprove it, or
Yeah,
what?
Then we do a right ballot, is what he's saying.
If there was only one candidate for the position, that we would just.
Cast a white ballot.
Yeah, I move we approve the slate as nominated, and that we just vote on the, well, there's only one
Yeah,
president,
you take it.
one vice president, one treasurer, right? So
I think it's all on that ballot.
And it's all on one ballot. We did discuss that if there was not going to be any nominations from the floor, that we were still going to do the ballot. So unless we have objections to that, that's what we decided to do. Okay. Since it may be a couple minutes, I think we're going to switch gears here and we'll do the blue ticket drawing, because we might as well get that out of the way. So Gus, if you could bring the bucket up here, we'll just do that real quickly while they're writing in on the ballots. Hopefully it won't take too long. We want to get you all out of here. Let me tell you that we do have a speaker. It did go out in the email, but some of you didn't know about it, but we do have a speaker on academia notes later.
Whose name was on that one?
133, 133 blue ticket.
There you go. Pull out your blue ticket.
The winner.
you want to come up, Jerry, and make that announcement? Yeah. Jerry, why don't you come to the mic, because they can't hear you.
As most of you know, the Christmas dinner is a potluck, but the club does supply the coffee, the drinks, and the ham and the turkey. So if you can just give me a head count, raise your hand, and if your significant other is going to attend, raise both hands if they're not here today. Just give me an idea of how many people are going so I know how much turkey to make.
When is it? What day?
It's a good question. I don't have a date.
It's the 22nd.
The 16th, and that, is that a
22nd.
December 22nd, and remember, it starts at 6 p.m., not 7 p.m. I know last year a lot of people were disappointed. So 6 p.m. on December 22nd, that's our...
It says 6:30.
Okay, I'm sorry, 6:30, correct.
And that's a Tuesday.
It's on a Tuesday.
Okay, so again, raise your hands. I just want to get a kind of an idea. So can somebody count that side and I'll count this side?
About 1 inch on this side, Barry.
About 40 to 50. Okay. Okay, that's a good thing. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to have the Vice President make a presentation.
Hi there. There is going to be a work party at formerly Quail Botanical Gardens, now named San Diego Botanic Garden, on the second Saturday of the month, which is the 12th, at 8:30 in the morning. And I really hope a lot of you can come out and help us. We've got a whole lot of work to do. Those big grasses are pushing the trees out of the way. Okay, the December meeting or potluck is Tuesday, December the 22nd, because of the holiday. It's on Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. And we're going to have a plant exchange, gift exchange, plant related, hopefully, plants we'd like, and exchange. So when you bring one in, we'll give you a ticket, so then you'll be eligible for the drawing when we draw for those. And so if you choose to participate in that, that would be fun. And there will be further details in the December newsletter as well. And as well, you can read the newsletter. I'll put all that stuff in there about the food. Yeah.
A little misunderstanding here. Do you want? Are we having a gift exchange?
A gift exchange, yeah.
Of plants?
Yeah. Plants or plant related.
Something about giving us a ticket for the drawing.
Oh, okay. Well, when you bring the gift in, we'll put it on the table and we will give you a ticket.
Okay.
And then we'll have the drawing later and call you.
And you're not going to be doing the...
We won't have the raffle then, no. Okay. Yeah, I just had a question if we wrap the gifts, and I think it's kind of neat to wrap the gifts since it's Christmas time. And if it is a plant, maybe the plant can top of it stick out of the paper, that's okay too. Yeah, make it a little festive, so we'll have fun. Thank you. That's all I have to say, so. Okay, I think they're about ready, though, to get the ballots up.
Okay, June's going to go ahead and push it so the ballots will be out here soon. I want to make an announcement that was in the newsletter about tissue culture propagation class that we're proposing. This is something that Jose put together, and I think it would be a good thing if you're interested in propagating plants. I know when I was at Cal Poly Pomona, I took a class in tissue culture, and it was well worthwhile. So I think we're just going to have to wait a few minutes for the ballots. So talk amongst yourselves, I guess.
Hi, I'm Linda.
Yes.
Why not go ahead and introduce the speaker?
Yeah, so let us all sit here.
All right, I've been asked to introduce the speaker, and Jim Russell is the president of the Macadamia Nut Society. He hails from Fallbrook, California, where he grows quite a few macadamias, as well as other fruit trees. And he's pretty much an expert on the cultivation and harvesting of macadamias.
Could you hold your ballots until they're all passed out? That way we know if you got it or not, okay? You can just do that.
Okay, hold your ballots until they're all passed out, please.
You want one more? You got one? Thank you. One more.
Put an X like where the city is now.
So everyone votes delegates their candidates, so we don't have a chair or vice chair.
What was the question?
It says yes or no on all of them, so I said if everyone votes no on a chair, we can have one.
It's true. But the odds are that somebody would vote yes on it.
Yeah, we'll get a bucket or something.
If anybody needs a pen, raise your hand. We'll try to accommodate you.
Just in better shape. My mother has a dog just like that, not as fat. Her dog's fat.
They're good companions.
Touchy.
Does it have the same personality?
I would think so.
If you could hold on to your ballots, and we will collect them all at one time.
Got 2 ballots left. Has everybody got a ballot?
I don't know why we have yes and no. You can't. It's just a check. If it's a no. Yeah, I don't really made up the ballots. I don't know why it's yes or no. What does a negative vote for somebody mean? It means I'm not voting. It just counts. You're abstaining. So right, so basically that's abstaining. So it's not counted out. I guess it won't be counted as a positive vote. Yeah, but so maybe we should clarify that before we hand them in. So
What if somebody votes no? It's just like abstaining.
right. So if you vote no on a candidate, that's just abstaining. That's not. It just means you refuse to vote on that candidate.
No, we voted. We voted no, we don't want them.
Right. Well, there's no. But there's no. Well, how are we going to count that? We have to figure out how we're going to count that. Okay, I guess you're right. Then if there's so that if there's more no's than yes, then that candidate, then there is no elected for that office. Okay. Okay. I didn't make the ballot, I don't know.
Let's go, Mr. Russell.
David, aren't you in charge of the nominating committee?
I'm not in charge of the ballots or the collection or the way that they're done. I'm told I'm strictly to nominate and bring up the candidates.
Yes or don't vote, right?
Who decided that?
Well, don't hand in your ballots yet until we confirm what we're doing with them. Do not hand in your ballots until we've got this confirmed, okay?
How complicated is this? Come on.
There are 3 candidates for one position. Or actually, there's 4 candidates for one position. So what if, right for the secretary, there are 4 candidates. There's yes, no, yes, and no. So we have 4 possibilities on one office, right?
It's a majority vote.
It's a majority of yeses. Okay, so that what we're doing is agreeing on. So it's the majority of yeses for the candidate that counts. What a no? What does a no signify?
Nothing. A no means nothing.
Yeah, but how are we going to, the no's don't cancel out yeses. A no means, it does not mean a vote for the other candidate.
Okay, I think that we need to just make this as simple as possible. I was told I'm not in charge of the balloting or how this is set up at this point. I'm just part of the nominating committee to nominate the people. But it should be a majority rules. It really, if you've got one yes, if it's an uncontested seat and you've got one yes in there, and that person is elected. I mean, it's a majority rule.
Why vote at all?
To me, something like this, it should be just between the 2 secretary positions. But I'm not in charge of that.
Running the election, right? Is that day long?
I'm not running anything. I'm the nominating committee.
Claire, why should you be running it?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it is fair. If you say no, that means it's not vote, right? Then why we make so difficult?
I have a comment right here.
If you're not, 这些县看一看，可以叫其他人笑他。
May I move that we only count the yeses, since that's the only
We have a motion that we only count the yeses.
Second.
Got a lot of seconds. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so how many opposed? We have 2 opposed. So it passes. We're only going to count the yeses. I agree. That's the only thing that makes sense.
Does anybody need any more time? No. Okay, pass your ballots to the center aisle.
So they who's in charge?
Who's on first?
You didn't put your name?
Good job, Dave. You cleared it up.
Yeah, thank you. You are the real chairman.
This shouldn't be this hard.
She's not able to check anything. You want to come out and against everything?
There is a switch on here. You're going to have to pull those off. Okay, I'm glad that is all over with, and we will count the votes and have a decision after the speaker. But I would like to move ahead and again announce the speaker, Jim Russell, the president of Macadamia Nut Society. So let's give him a warm welcome.
Last call on the ballot.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that.
Last call on the ballot.
Last call on the ballots. Let's go get them over here. Ballots are going up. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. No more ballots.
We give Junior attention.
All right.
Come on, guys. 1 minute.
Show of hands. How many of you know Paul Thompson? Huh?
New one?
Officer, how many of you do Paul Thompson? All right. Paul was my friend for lots of years. And as you all know, Paul was the co-founder of your organization. Well, Paul was very instrumental in the founding of the California Macadamia Society as well. So he spread himself for a lot of good plant growing in California and other places as well. So I'm going to talk about macadamia. I did bring a handout for you. I don't have a PowerPoint, but if you didn't get that, it's back on the back table. It talks about my farm and what I can do. Its title is Harvesting, Husking, Drying, and Marketing Macadamia Nuts, and a few more thoughts about growing macadamias.
Guys, why don't you have a seat and I'll pass them around. Go ahead and have a seat. I'll pass them around.
Well, I'll start with the history. And of course, the history of the macadamia is associated with the history of spaceship Earth. So we'll start, if you go back to 1519 to 21, when a fellow by the name of Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese guy, decided to take his life in his hand and see if he could really sail around spaceship Earth, to prove beyond a doubt that it really is a ball. And he made it all the way around. It took him about 2.5 years. He didn't find macadamias on his trip, unfortunately. But because of that, the thinkers in Europe kind of postulated that there must be a continent down on the other side, down south someplace, to offset Europe. Otherwise, the space Earth would wobble a whole lot more. And they called it the unknown land in the south. Of course, they used the Latin name, which is Terra Australis Incognita. So you can see where the name came from when they finally found the place. The land, unknown land in the south. Well, from 1609 to 1644, the Dutch actually went to Australia. And they mapped the whole northern part of it and the whole western part of it. So, and they were trading there with. Well, in 1770, a few years later, Captain Cook, you all remember him from the Sandwich Islands going on? Well, he bumped into the eastern side of Australia. And as those English folks always like to do, he jumped off the boat, stuck the flag in the ground, and he said, I claim this ground for the King of England, and he named it New South Wales. A few years later, the British established a penal colony there, and all of the folks that weren't in favor of the crown, they sent them down there and put them in prison. And that was, as far as recorded history is concerned, that was the start of the population of Australia. We don't count those 300,000 Aborigines that was there for a long time. They weren't from Europe. They didn't write things down, so we don't count them. But they were eating macadamias long before we put a penal colony on Australia. Well, let's get to macadamia then. In 1843, a fellow with a big, long-handled name, Frederick Wilhelm Ludwig Leichhardt, a German fellow, a botanist who was working in Australia, actually brought some clippings of macadamias back to the herbarium. They didn't do anything with them, they didn't eat. So they were found, but they weren't found. Go to 1857, and we find two guys, Ferdinand von Mueller, a royal botanist at Melbourne, and Walter Hill, the director of the Botanic Gardens at Brisbane. They were out along the Pine River in the Moreton Bay District, and they brought back some clippings of macadamia. And that's the first recorded history of a macadamia actually being recognized. They established it as the genus Macadamia. They got the name from a doctor of the secretary of the Philosophic Institute of Victoria, John McAdam. He was an MD. There's no record that John McAdam ever saw a macadamia nut, ever tasted one, or even saw the leaves of it. But to honor the guy, these two folks decided to put his name on that genus. The macadamia is a member of the Proteaceae family, same family that all our proteas in, all those beautiful flowers that we got from South Africa and a few from Australia. So it kind of gives us the idea that maybe those two countries were one way back when before they started, plate tectonics started to move stuff around on spaceship Earth. The macadamias were first taken into Hawaii in 1878. And surprise, surprise, the next year in 1879, they were planted in California. A gentleman by the name of Professor Gwinnell brought seeds in and planted them on the campus of Berkeley. Of all places, pretty cold up in that part of the world, but he planted them and they grew. He planted them up along Strawberry Creek. And until about 15 years ago, they were still growing. About 15 years ago, they wanted to build a new dormitory, and they took out the last of those trees that were first planted to bring the macadamia into
How
California.
did they get to Hawaii?
I'll tell you that in a second. All I gotta do is look here. The Integrafolia was introduced in Hawaii by W.H. Purvis, the manager of the Honoco Sugar Company of Haina, Hawaii. That's the first recorded history of macadamias being planted in Hawaii. In 1926, the territorial legislature of Hawaii was trying to reforest the islands after some pretty devastating hurricanes. So they passed a law that said any land planted to macadamias would be tax-free for 5 years. All those good enterprising folks said, I like that idea. And that's how the macadamia really got started, other than as a hobby plant in Hawaii, was because of that law. If any of you folks flew into Hawaii on United Airlines 30 years ago, you got on a plane, you got a little silver packet of macadamia nuts. And that's how most of the world first became aware of macadamias, was because you flew to Hawaii. So they are certainly credited with establishing the macadamia, if you will, as an industry and making the world aware of it. Most of the Europeans, unless they've been to Hawaii, don't know about macadamia. That's changing. The world is really planting macadamia nuts. Kenya, South Africa, Malawi are planting a lot of macadamias. And if you take a Lufthansa flight from Europe to Kenya, you get a silver packet of macadamia nuts. It's got that big Kenya elephant on it that says Kenya macadamias on it. So they're trying to advertise in the world that there are macadamias in the world. Do they taste different was the question. Let me get to that, and I'll answer that in a roundabout way. There are 10 known botanical varieties of macadamia nuts. You know what a botanical variety is? It's a variety that you plant the seeds, it will give you a plant of the same physical characteristics. So there are 10 known botanical varieties of macadamia nuts. Unfortunately, 8 of them are not edible. They're sort of like acorns. They got so much tannic acid or other things in them that you can't eat them. The 2 known varieties that are edible that we plant are Integrafolia and Tetraphylla. Tetraphylla for 3, Tetraphylla for 4. And if you look at the end of a branch, you will see on the Tetraphylla's 4 leaves. If you look at the branch of an Integrafolia, you'll see 3 leaves. Now some of the other characteristics are, she asked if they taste the same, the Tetraphyllas have about 4% more natural sugar in them. They're sweeter. The Integrafolias have less sugar. After we started really growing them in Hawaii, the University of Hawaii started doing research so they could bolster the industry. They're a university of, they're required to do agricultural research because they're a land-grant college. They wanted a nut that they could deep fry in coconut oil to give it a shelf life, kill all the bugs on it, kill all the enzyme on it. Well, to do that, you need a round nut. You can't have a bunch of things sticking out on it. You need it to be kind of small so that by the time you get the inside cooked, the outside isn't a crispy critter. And that's why they rejected the Tetraphylla. Tetraphyllas are sometimes football shaped. They're big, they're small. They got little protrusions sticking out on them. And they got that more sugar in them. So they don't handle deep frying in coconut oil well. Certainly they don't handle it at the same temperature and the same duration as integrafoliates. So most of the world that are dealing with the industry standard, which is to not deep fried coconut oil, reject the tetrafilms. About 80% of what we're growing in Southern California is either the Beaumont, which I'll talk about in a minute, or the Kate, which is a tetrafilm. And most of the other nuts and are tetrafilms. About 30%, 35% are tetrafolios. The tetrafolia has a much thicker shell, and it has a stronger consistency. They're really tough mothers to crack, in other words. Yeah.
Don't the tetrafolia have a softer leaf, not quite as much like the holly?
We'll get to the leaves in a minute. We'll show it to them back here. I'm going to break up. So if you're in the business of raising nuts to sell and you don't intend to deep fry them in coconut oil, and we certainly don't have enough production in Southern California to justify putting in a processing plant, the tetrafillers are a better deal because they are sweeter. You know, part of what you do when you deep fry them in coconut oil, or if you dry roast them, is the difference between white bread and toast. You've converted some of the carbohydrates to sugar. So those integrafolias that aren't as sweet as the tetrafillers, you deep fry them in coconut oil, and they become a little bit sweeter. Unfortunately, there's also an oil exchange that takes place, so you've got a healthy product, all the oil in macadamia nuts monounsaturated, and you put it in a saturated oil, and now you've got a product that's not quite as healthy as it was before. Okay, you want to know about the leaves? Let's talk about them. I got one bag here. This, I'm going to pass it around. This is a leaf of a Beaumont. Now it's a hybrid anyhow. It might not be a Beaumont. A hybrid is a naturally occurring cross between those two botanical varieties. The Beaumont is a variety that Dr. Beaumont found growing naturally in Australia. If you look at the southeastern seaboard of Australia, the tetrafillas grow in the south, the integrafolias grow in the north. There's a little valley in the middle where they both grow, and Dr. Beaumont, who was at that time in charge of the Hawaiian Agricultural Experimental Station, brought that back. And so that's how the Beaumont got established here. Now it also got established in South Africa. South Africa has grown a lot of macadamias, and about half of their production is Beaumont. Beaumont was never recognized here as a commercial variety because it's got a couple of problems. They're beautiful trees. They're much better trees than any other tree we found. So if you're in the nursery business, you like that because it grows fast. But it doesn't want to drop its nuts. And as they hang there beyond maturity, not only will the husk split open, the shell splits open. And it pushes a root out. Well, when the shell splits open, it's junk. So what most of the folks are doing when the husk splits open, they pick the nut off the tree. That's the only macadamia nut you need to pick off the tree. All the rest of them, when they're ripe, they're on the ground. Okay. I don't know what you do if you had 100 acres of them. I don't know how you do. What the South Africans are doing, they're laying with sprays to spray the trees to make them drop. Well, why Beaumont is a great backyard tree, it'll set blossoms, a big flush of blossoms, 4 or 5 times a year. So anytime you get company, you can take them out, you'll see a few blossoms on the tree, you'll see nuts hanging on the tree, and there's a few nuts that are ready for harvest. So they're really a nice show and tell backyard tree. They're just a little bit of a problem if you want to make a commercial variety. But folks do, and you know, you got it planted, and as there it is, you got to work with it. If you notice those leaves, they weren't too jagged, but it's a hybrid cross. So this guy, it's got some jaggers on it. This is a leaf off a Kate. That's a tetraphylla. some more cake. This guy, if you look, is very smooth leaves. They're kind of small. These leaves have a stem on them. If you look at that cake, you'll see there's no stem on those leaves at all. This is an integrifolia with a nice big cluster of nuts. There's another cluster of nuts to pass around. Those are cakes. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what you're going to do once you've produced a crop of macadamias. You spent a lot of time, you planted the tree, you watered it, you fertilized it, you nurtured it. They don't need to be trimmed, by the way, unless you don't like the looks of them.
Well, now, Jim, I've got a neighbor on Queen and La Mesa that has an awful lot of deadwood where the old racemes were. Sure. And that wood is just totally gone dead. So I've been trimming that out.
He's questioned my comment that you don't need it. Don't need to trim the tree. You can, if you don't like the way it looks, if it's got things hanging on that you don't like, cut them off. If you want some more light in it, trim it. But you know, on any tree, if it's got deadwood on it, certainly you're going to cut that out. But for the production of nuts, for the tree's own sake, it doesn't need to be trimmed. If you don't like the way it looks, by all means have at it. And since it's an evergreen tree growing all the time, no matter what you do. Problem is, if you open it up to the sun, just like most any other tree, it'll sunburn. So if you open the canopy, or if you make it so the sun's going to hit it, certainly our summer sun, you need to put suntan lotion on it. He's laughing about that. Suntan lotion is a mixture of white latex paint and water. You mix it 50-50. So when you drive around and you see these trees that are painted white, it looks pretty, but that's not why they paint it. That's suntan lotion to keep the tree from burning. When the nuts fall on the ground, you want to pick them up, and I recommend a minimum of at least weekly. Certainly, if you got tetraphyllis, you need to at least weekly. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the evergreens can get sunburned if you, let's say, cut the center and the sun gets in there.
That's right.
This is just the evergreens, not the regular trees that lose all the leaves and stuff.
Macadamias are evergreens, and that means they don't shed their leaves.
So you don't want to open it up so that the evergreen, the trees that I have seen in Linda Vista, because there's several that I know for the rest, they're all real bushy, and there's no sunlight that would go through. So if they were to open up in the center, then we would have sunburn.
That's certainly a possibility, and so that's why I'm saying there's nothing wrong with doing it. If you want to open the canopy up, you get more light in, or get air through it, or if you want to watch your neighbors while she's out there sunbathing, have at it. All I'm telling you, if you open up that tree, you want to put some suntan lotion on it because that can kill the tree. Okay. Just like you the bark will actually just crack and fall off that tree if it gets sunburned. Just like you do if you get sunburned.
Thank you.
So that's what I'm saying. It's a very forgiving tree. If you want to trim it, have at it. Okay? And it doesn't matter what time of year it is, just have at it. But just a caution is, if you open up the sun, you might kill your tree. Yeah.
If you just want like a small backyard tree and you don't want it to get enormous, are they susceptible, or do they trim down pretty easily?
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. You can trim it anyway. If you don't like the shape of it, if you want to knock the top off it, have it. They don't care. They really don't care. They're not finicky about this stuff. They're not particularly finicky about the soil. The better the soil, the more better they're going to grow. But a lot of trees will turn up their toes. The California Avocado Society, way back when in 1954, formed an exploratory committee to look at macadamia nuts. Now, why would the Avocado Society do that? Why would the Avocado Society want to look at a macadamia? Any idea?
Replace the avocados.
Why do they want to replace the avocados?
Because they were taken off because of cinnamon root rot fungus.
Cinnamomum phytophthora, root rot fungus. They thought that the cinnamomum phytophthora fungus wouldn't affect the macadamia. They did an experiment. They took some They took some soil that they knew had cinnamon with top tor on it. They put it in pots, they planted avocados in them, and they died. Yanked out the avocados and put in macadamia nuts, and they said, boy, I like it in here. They just grew up with cinnamon. So they concluded that cinnamon with top tor doesn't affect the macadamia nut. Unfortunately, they concluded that a little bit wrong. Cinnamon with top tor does affect the macadamia. It affects it in an interesting way. If you break its, the macadamia left alone is immune to the cinnamon with top tor. But if you break its immune system down, the phytoplankton will attack it. How would you break it down? Got a gopher down there chewing on the roots. Out there digging, you want to fix your water line, you're digging up and cutting the roots. You get a little carried away with your weed whacker and you knock the bark off the bottom of it. Any ways that you can make a hole that comes in contact with the ground. And what you'll see on the macadamia is a little canker sore. Okay. If you take care of that canker sore as soon as it arrives, what I'm talking about is a nice, clean, sharp knife, cut that canker sore out, dip it in 10% Clorox solution between each cut so you don't spread it, and then paint it with a Bordeaux mix. That's an antifungal that will kill the cinnamon with top tor fungus. So they were almost right. That's what they were looking for, was a new plant that they could plant in place of avocados in soil that was infected with cinnamon with top tor. Okay, back to Harvard. Yes.
You said to paint on there?
Bordeaux. B-O-R-D-E-A-U-X. Nice French word. Excellent. Most any of your agricultural supply houses, fertilizer houses, has a powder called Bordeaux. You just mix it with water like a paste and paint it on a paintbrush.
It's like a cup of something.
Was another hand up over here? Yes.
Can you tell us a little about your background, how you got into this, and what you're doing now with macadamia? Why did you pick macadamia?
My background?
Yeah, relating to macadamia. How did you get into it?
I'm not sure that's interesting to everybody, but okay, you've asked you.
All right.
I was born and raised on a farm in Pennsylvania. At the age of 17, I left to join the United States Marine Corps. I spent 20 years in the Marine Corps. I went in as a private, I came out as a major. I came out in this wheelchair. I had three nice tours of Vietnam that a lot of the guards brought in Southeast Asia. But I bought a piece of property in Cauldron for my wife and family, and a year later the piece beside me, which looks right into my backyard, came up for sale. I bought that, and since I had no intention to sell it, I had to do something with it. Well, at that time I was going to San Diego State working on an MBA. So one of my finance classes I had to write a finance paper on, and I just discovered that macadamias grew in Southern California, so I did an article on the economic viability of macadamias in San Diego County. My professor loved it, I got an A. And it told me that I could make money raising macadamias. What I did was I went and bought the whole supply of California macadamias as out of your books, and I said, read them, and I wrote. That's how I got macadamias.
What are you doing with macadamias now? Do you have?
I've got 200 macadamia trees. I've got a total of 450 trees on my farm. I've got avocados, citrus. I've got lemons, lime, kumquats, pomelos. I've got some mulberries. Just a whole host of stuff because most of my marketing is done at certified farm markets. I used to go to 6 farm markets. That was when I was young and foolish. Now that I've got old, still old and foolish. I only go to one farm market. That's the Santa Monica Farmers Market. That's the biggest farm market in the state of California. Their Wednesday market. They're kind of taking some of the bloom off it by opening markets around it, but it's still the best market in San Diego, in California. Also been at it for a long time, so I've got a pretty good mail order business. I was just last week put in a fruit fly quarantine, so there goes. Interesting thing about macadamias, there's some navel orange worm and the Indian meal moth, and a few things like that will parasitize them if you don't take care of them. If you keep the weeds out of your grove, there's no place for those things to live. they're not gonna bother you. You may get a few, but they're certainly not gonna be an economic problem. Yeah, I thought, I forgot what I was talking about, but if, yeah, I lost both trains of thought. Yeah.
How do you like to get into the shell of the nut?
There's all kinds of ways to get into macadamia shell, but let me just talk a little bit before we get to the cracking. When your nuts fall on the ground, you want to get them off the ground so they don't get parasitized. Plus, they deteriorate rather rapidly. I mean, it's coming off the tree with about 35% moisture. So you get them off the ground, you want to get that husk off them and get them into screen bottom trays so the air can circulate around them. Any of you got a good compost pile? How hot does a compost pile get? 400 degrees, 150 degrees. You take a pile of husked macadamias, put them in a plastic bucket and let them set them. You got a compost pile. It's going to get hot, and those nuts are going to turn rancid real quick. So you don't want to do that. Don't harvest more than you can process today. Get the husk off them. Get them in screen bottom trays, and in ambient temperature, not out in the sun, so that the air can circulate around them, and they need to be there for 2 weeks. During that 2 weeks, several things will happen. One, they'll go from 35% moisture down to about 5% moisture. At that amount of moisture, they will keep for maybe 9 or 10 months. There's also a thing in macadamias called reducing sugars. An enzyme action will completely eliminate those during that 2-week period. If you heat a macadamia nut up with reducing sugars in, it turns brown all over. It looks like it's rotten. And it's just because you got a little carried away in 2 weeks time. Once they've been at least 2 weeks in there, they can stay a whole lot longer. They're very hardy. Then they go into a heat dryer. I dry mine at 94 degrees. It takes about 4 days. It's just, you can buy a good dryer at Walmart for like 30 bucks. Go around dehydrators. I built mine, and it's just a couple of, I got one of 1,000-watt glow coil, another one is 500 watt. Some little electronic fans for electrical components. What we're doing is we're taking the moisture out and give them a shelf life, but we're making that shell dry and brittle, and we're getting the moisture out of them so that you got a nice, sharp nut that tastes good. At that 5% moisture, they'll taste like coconut and a little bit gummy. So if your nuts are a little bit gummy, you just need to take the moisture out of them. Once you've dried them, if you expose them to the air, within 2 weeks, they'll be just like you did dry them, because they'll suck the moisture right back in. Well, if you've dried them that way, that shell gets real brittle, and it will then, if you hit it with knife blades, it'll pop open and not munch the kernel. If the shell is wet, it will give, and the knife blades come around and get it. It may pop it open, but it's going to munch the kernel, and you get this mess that falls out of the bottom. Even our good electric crackers have knife blades on, but this guy is one of the best that I found for non-mechanical crackers. There's all kinds of junk out there, but this thing has knife blades on it. It won't cut you. And this is made from stainless steel. You can see the hole there in the middle. It's reversible. I'm going to show you the other side. That's the side for little nuts. So you just flip it over one way or the other. I just put it around the fat part of the nut and give it a little squeeze and pop right open. And that's the best cracker nut. And these are made, well, the Gold Crown Macadamia sells these. Gold Crown Macadamia sells. I believe they were cut out in Taiwan, and Bob and Kitty Scholes put them together up in Well, once you've dried them, I said, once I do, I pull out the big nuts, and I bag them in heavy plastic bags, put them inside burlap bags, until I'm ready to use them. I pull out the big nuts because people are willing to pay a premium for them, and I let them do that. I give them the opportunity. Everyone likes big nuts? All of the, most of the what I call regulars, I crack them, separate them, sort them, bag them, and sell them. some pictures in here. If you look on the front page of the handout, you'll see that little worm down in the bottom left-hand corner. These are just little moths. They're about the size of my thumbnail, little nondescript little moths. They lay their egg. Normally, as soon as that husk pops open, there's a nice place for them to lay their eggs. They lay their egg right in there. So that's when you're not going to parasitize. As soon as that egg hatches out, about 4 or 5 days, that worm chews a hole right through that shell and gets in and makes a mess out of your nut. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see some kernels that were attacked by things called a fruit spotting bug. There's a picture of one there that's a southern green stink bug. That's the predominant guy we have in Southern California. He's got a long proboscis. He gets on a nut, he'll drill a hole through the husk, through the shell, and suck on the kernel. And that's what those spots are. Of course, when he pulls it out, some bacteria probably stay here, so that kernel's going to. If you keep the weeds out of your grove, these will not be an economic problem. You'll get a few of them. And at the top picture, you'll see that's a real high-tech harvesting. That's DU-Del with a lawn rake and a dustpan. Works pretty well. If you got a problem with squirrels, any of you see squirrel problems?
No kidding.
No kidding. You can raise nuts for the squirrels or for yourself, but not for both of you. They will get them all.
And the rats.
And the rats. This guy, you see a picture of him there in our hand of him. This is a Duke 7 trap. Duke 7 trap. You set it, you put it over the hole, and when the squirrel comes out, it cuts him in half. No more problem. No more problem. You get to catch about 4 of them, and then the whole grove figures out what's going on, and you won't catch too many more.
Would they leave?
Huh?
Would they leave? If you get 4 or 5 of them?
What they do, what you have to do is find all the entrances and put one on each entrance. I've had them wait as long as 10 days down to come out because they knew it wasn't right, but they couldn't get around it. After you've caught about 3 or 4, they'll either stay in the hole and die of starvation, or they'll dig another way out. Yes?
I've had trouble with rats on macadamia. They'll bore through anything to get into macadamia.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Oh, because they like it. They're just like you. They like macadamia. Free food. And unfortunately, rats will live up in your trees and never come down. So you need to put the poison up in the tree if you're after rats. But you need to be aggressive because they're nasty things. They'll mess up your whole life. If you're going to put bait out, I'll just caution you on using a bait that kills them on 180, like arsenic or strychnine. Unfortunately, that's a good way to get rid of them, but you're going to lose your dogs and cats the same way. You need a blood thinner, something that they've got to eat 4 or 5 days in a row, and then their blood gets so thin they bleed. Because what squirrels do, you put out bait, they'll go get it, and your bait will start, as soon as they find it, it'll disappear fast because they take it down in their holes. And then when the mood strikes them, they eat it, and then you wipe out the whole family. But if you use arsenic or strychnine, and your dog eats that squirrel, it could very well kill them. It'll certainly make them sick. Sir?
Have you tried that it's like BRC or BCQ poison that Gritchetos sell?
I have not.
Well, and they say that it doesn't poison secondarily.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, any blood thinner. It would say on an anticoagulant. What it does, it keeps their blood from coagulating.
I use a product like that for rats called Quintox. Will that also work on the squirrels, or?
Sure. If it'll kill a rat, it'll sure kill a squirrel.
What about barn owls, kestrels?
Barn owls are a little bit small for, don't go after rats, but they're a little bit small for squirrels. Yeah, barn owls swallow their food whole.
Oh, they do?
Yeah. You ever seen it? You never watched it? Very interesting. They swallow it whole. They don't have a butt. They regurgitate it. They make a little ball down there with the bones and the hair, and they cough it back up. So if you put a barn nest up, look around on the ground, and you'll see these nice little hard balls that they cough through.
I don't have a pest question, but how long does it take the nut to mature? From flower to fruit?
Oh, about 7 months. You'll find that most of our varieties of Beaumont are setting their blossoms in the end of February, beginning of March, in that time, February, March. Now they're evergreen, so whenever the moose strike it, they'll push a blossom, but not many. And we normally start harvesting about the 15th of October. Just a little bit, and then it builds up. But if you're growing a tetraphylla, you should be done harvesting by about the 15th of January. If you had a windstorm, you'd be done before that. If you got a Beaumont, you're going to be harvesting all year round. There's another, yes?
What did you use for getting into the nuts before that nice machine?
Well, that was around before I was. A gentleman in Rancho Santa Fe took a pair of vice grips and he welded those little cutters right inside that vice grip. And so he had an adjustment thing. It was kind of cumbersome adjusting it. And that's how this was born. And the first one he made after that worked pretty good. They didn't have these nice handles on it, so it wasn't very friendly to your hand.
How about watering? How much water? How often?
Okay. Macadamia is like water. If you've got a problem with a macadamia, 99% of the time it's because you didn't water it enough. They want water just like an avocado. We're talking about 3 acre-feet a year. In Fallbrook, I'm paying $850 an acre foot. If I have an acre of macadamias, how much am I paying for water? $1,900 right off the bat. So that's a big expense. You got to figure if you want to grow these things commercially in Southern California. And it would appear that the price of water is heading for $1,000 an acre. They want water. And they want water out at the drip line. You know what I'm talking about, the drip line? If you had an umbrella, the outside, that's where the water falls on. Or if you look at the tree, and we want to do that because the roots grow at about the same speed as the tree. By the way, if you want me to stop talking, tell me, I'll talk all night. The roots grow at about the same speed as the tree, so the feeder roots are right out there where those leaves are. So that's where you want to put the water. And you want to get the top 3 feet of soil wet. If you water your tree for 10 minutes, you water that much soil. That's hardly even enough for grass. Because those roots are down there, and you want them down there. Otherwise, if the roots are on top of the soil, the good wind comes along and blows your tree out. So you grow for a tree for 20 years and wish the wind moved over. So I water my trees unless there's a sand animal blowing once a week. And I've got micro twirlers that put a little bit of water on for a long time so that water won't run off and percolate down. And how you can tell, run your irrigation system the way you run it, go dig a hole, see how far down it went. If it didn't go down 3 feet, run it longer. If you're getting runoff, then your orifice is too big, put a smaller orifice on your tree. Drips. Drips are a great thing for saving water, and with a dam for growing trees. Now they did the Trumpa project quite a few years ago. That was on, I think, a 25-acre grove of avocados. They thought that the drip would go here, and you'd get this nice pyramid of water going down the ground. Well, you know, they do, but the only place that has enough water to sustain life is that one little drip, because we got a little drip of water going right down. What makes you think the tree's going to find that spot? Even if you put 6 of them on the tree. The tree puts a root where it needs it. You know, if it's starting to lean, you put a root out over there. So, but they're going to put roots out where they want to. So you can't play Russian roulette with your watering system. These trees got to have water. Now you can really skimp on the water and the tree won't die. They're very hardy. You skimp on an avocado, it's dead. It'll just turn up its toes and die. You can skimp on a macadamia once it's established. But if you want nuts that you can sell and eat, you got to pour the water to them. Think about it. What the tree does, it makes the husk, it makes the shell, and it makes a little cellulose sac. And it's got to have water so we can pump that sack full of oil. If you'll see, if you're getting little hard peas of macadamia nuts, that's an immature nut. And it's normally because by under irrigated. It just couldn't get enough stuff out of the soil to pump that thing full of oil. Now, if you see the edges of your leaves are starting to turn brown, especially if the edge of it looks like somebody burned it with a match, that's a salt burn.
Sulfur?
Salt.
Salt, okay.
The water that we're putting on the soil in Southern California is about 850 parts per million salt, the whole list, the whole gamut of salts. The tree's smart enough not to suck salt. But if there's nothing down there to suck but salt, it'll suck it. And what happens is the water and the salts go up into the tree, gets out in the leaves, transpiration happens, evaporation through the stomata, water goes away, the salt stays there and burns your leaves off the tree. So if you're seeing brown edges and something looks like burn, you're not. Either you put too much salt on the soil, fertilizer all salt, fertilizer 100% salt, or you're not watering the tree enough. Trees have to have nitrogen to live, but you can kill a macadamia with kindness. They do not like to receive nitrogen. They don't like to see any fertilizer. So you have to be sneaky about it. Figure out how much nitrogen that tree needs. You know, on fertilizers, there's 3 numbers: NPK, first one's nitrogen. If you got if you had 15, 15, 15, 15% of what's in the bag is nitrogen. Well, if you figure out that tree needs 5 pounds of nitrogen, this stuff is only 15% nitrogen. A little multiplication, you can figure out how many pounds of that fertilizer that tree needs this year, 12 months. Well, I can break that down, divide by 12, and every month go out and put fertilizer on. So I don't get too much at one time. Okay. Yeah.
I had a friend that I gave a macadamia tree to 3 times. And each time I told him, now don't fertilize it until it needs it. But it took him 3 times before he listened.
Slow learner.
And, you know, a young tree, just the best thing was not to mess with it, just let it get established.
How many knew the movie actor Robert Stack?
Sure.
Nice guy, right? He was a hell of a fine guy, I gotta tell you. I run a trap shooting program for the Paralyzed Veterans of America, a fundraiser for our chapter. And every year he was my honorary chairman for 22 years. Well, one year I gave him a macadamia nut tree. And so he took it home. His gardener stole it before he got it in the ground. So he called me up and said, hey, my macadamia tree disappeared. So I said, I'll bring you one up, Bob. But I waited for my parents to come out because my dad thought a lot of it. So my folks come out for a visit. I called up, Bob, hey, can I bring you up that macadamia tree? Sure, come on up. So I took my dad and Mom up. We went to Bob Sack's house and went through his house and took some pictures. And every time I put it on, when I saw him, he said, I want a guy in a block that's got a tree with balls. He wrote, Bob Sack wrote 2 books, both on trap shooting. But you know what, he set a world record in skeet shooting that hasn't been broken today. Really? When he was 17 years old. I bought my dad one of those books. I put those pictures in. I took it to Bob Sack's house. I had Bob sign it, gave it to my dad. He loved it. He went to the hospital a short time after he took that book with him. Everyone came in his room and said, hey, look at that. Quite a guy. You want to know about me a little bit more? Yeah.
Years ago, we used to see the Macadamia Association at the fair all the time.
Sure.
And that's diminished. Is it just a lack of interest, or are there too few mac growers up there? It seems like there's quite a few of them around El Dios and up towards Fallbrook and around.
It's interesting. That's the 22nd agricultural district in the state of California that runs the San Diego County Fair. They made a conscious decision to drive agriculture out of the fair.
Yeah.
They did it because they wanted commercial stuff in there. The year that, what he was talking about, every year the Macadamia Society had a booth in there. We manned it 8 hours a day with our members. We brought in the cracker nuts. We turned the cracker on and cracked nuts for people. We passed out free literature. And the year that they said, the fair said, All the ag stuff's going in the infield. I was the president of Macadamia Society. I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to ask my members to give up their time to go out into the infield where ain't nobody going to go. To add insult to injury, they put a band on each side of us. Anybody who did find their way out there, you couldn't talk to them. You had bands blaring. And I wrote a rather scathing letter that appeared in the Union Tribune and the North County Times. After I went into the fair was over, when I explained to the citizens of San Diego County why the Macadamia Society wasn't there. As a result of that, they held a meeting with Ag, and they decided to put one booth in the O'Brien building, and that would be the Farm Bureau booth, and anybody who wanted to could tag on to the Farm Bureau booth. We went back and we tagged on that for the next 5 years. The rare fruit growers, by the way, went out into the infield. And I talked to several members, and they were all wearing earplugs. They were coming out with headaches because of everything. But that's what happened to us at the fair. They made a, well, you know, just like everyone else, they're feeling the budget crunch. They got to make money, and Ag wasn't giving them money. Ag was costing them money because they were giving awards away for the most educational display and that kind of stuff. So, you know, it ended up coming out in the end that we still have Ag at the fair, but we're not very much. Not very much.
How do you plant from the seed to get to macadamia?
Okay. How do you get a tree from seeds? One thing I'll tell you, that a macadamia nut seed will not produce true to anything other than its horticultural variety. So if you plant a cake seed, you're not going to get a cake tree. You're going to get a tetraphyllum, but you may not, you know, it may be something that would take 20 years to produce, or maybe 90% shell. You're not going to get a cake, in other words. So what you do is, macadamia is like bottom heat. What I did when I wanted to plant a bunch of them, I took a 4x8 sheet of plywood, split it down the middle, so I had two pieces 8 foot long, 2 foot high, put an end on it, that's a box. I put a nursery heating pad in the bottom. I put in 1.5 foot of potting soil. I covered the whole top of that with macadamia nuts that had not been dried. One nuts that haven't been dried. Put a nursery mister down the middle, threw a sheet of plastic over the top of it, and turned on the heat, turned on the water. I sprayed it twice a day. Within 4 weeks, those things were pushing tops and roots. So in about 4 to 5 weeks, you got to be ready to take those out and plant them in something else. That's how you propagate macadamia. Now you want to graft those trees if you, unless you just want a tree to look at. Because you don't know what you're going to get from that seed. It'll be a macadamia nut, but you have no idea about its production capabilities. So that's when you can graft it. Figure about 2 years after after it's sprouted, it'll be ready to graft. Now, an interesting thing about the macadamia tree. Most trees right underneath the bark is called the cambium, and there's 2 layers there, the xylem and the phloem. One carries the water and nutrients up from the roots, goes to the leaves for photosynthesis, converts that stuff to starch and sugars, and the other layer carries it back down and distributes throughout the whole tree, even the roots, to keep them alive. Well, macadamia, at the center of the tree, carries the water and the nutrients up from the roots. So in the cambium, there's just that one layer that carries the product of photosynthesis back to the rest of the tree. For years, they thought you could not graft a macadamia nut. No one was successful. Until a little guy in a nursery in Hawaii decided he girdled the bark on a branch. Which he took about 3 inches of bark and he just stripped it right off, right down to bare wood. Well, what happens? The water and nutrients kept coming up to that branch, but it couldn't translocate it back to the rest of the tree, so that branch sent a whole lot of extra nutrients in it. So he girdled it, and he left it for about 6 weeks, and then he cut it off, and he took his budwood from that. Because if you ever grafted a macadamia nut, you'll find it may take 6 months for that to take. And if the scion don't have extra nutrients in it, you can't live that long. So if you're going to do a wedge grafting, you cut the end of that in a nice wedge. You bend this. You want to put it right where the tree and that sign are the exact same size. Got a wedge in it, shove it in there, bring it back up, wrap it with tape. Now, most of them are also dipping it in paraffin, which seals it, which keeps it from drying out, and it keeps bugs and all the other stuff. But hell, Tom Dell back there can do that. He's done lots of these things. So that's how you propagate the seed, and that's how you graft it. You get a good variety on top of it.
You break the shell. The shell.
You do not crack the shell. If you crack the shell, you got something to eat. But once you crack the shell, it's not going to grow. Okay? You might not think that shell is going to crack open, but you put the heat to it, and I'm talking about like 80 degrees on your temperature probe, and you water that twice a day and keep it moist, that thing will pop right up. It just swells up and pops up.
So you can take green nuts prior to their cracking, actually cut them off the tree. Like that cluster, you could actually take those nuts.
These are immature.
Okay.
If they were mature, they'd have fallen on the ground.
All right.
So I just brought this down
till
for
they haven't cracked open, but they have to drop first.
Well, that's how you know they're ripe. Okay. That's how you know you got a mature nut. Now the integrifolias, the husk don't normally split open on them. So you got to have a much tougher husker for an integrifolia than you do for a cape or a bone. Because once it cracks open, it comes out pretty easily.
Are you saying that until they drop on the ground, they're not ready to eat?
That's right.
So how, you harvest it when they fall on the ground?
That's right, you pick them up off the ground.
Pick up the ground?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's why you find about the 1st of September, you need to go out and rake all the leaves on it, crap out of there, and get it out of there.
Keep it clean for the...
Yep, so you don't want to be crawling around in those leaves on your hands and knees.
You don't put any kind of a tarp or nothing on the, just the ground?
Some people put a netting out too, use the netting to catch the nuts.
They've tried that commercially, it don't work because there's too much other stuff falling on.
Yeah, a lot of leaves.
And it gets caught up in the netting, you can't get it out. Most nuts, they shade the tree. But those are deciduous trees, a very big distinction. The deciduous tree goes to sleep in the fall, wakes up in the spring, and it pushes blossoms. So all of the blossoms are within 3 weeks of being the same age. So they just, when the majority of them are ripe, they go and shake the tree, nuts fall down and they got them. Well, the macadamia is an evergreen. Whenever the moon strikes it, it'll push a blossom. So if you go out there and shake the tree, you're going to throw away about half your crop.
Can you compare the California macadamias and the Hawaiian macadamias? I understood the Hawaiian ones are the tetraphylla they grow there, we grow integrifolia.
Well, we grow a lot of integrifolias too, and you can't tell them apart. Integrifolias and integrifolias, that's what they're growing all over the world. The only difference is they process their nuts. And so then they become different because they've been processed. Let me tell you let's talk about the world industry of the macadamia. For years, Hawaii was the #1 producer of macadamias. About 25 years ago, old Tierras Australias Incognitas, a socialist country, Department of Primary Industry says, wait a minute, macadamia is native to Australia, we ought to be the world's #1 producer. What do? Tax-free for 5 years, plant macadamias, and they did.
Queensland especially.
As of about 7 years ago, Australia is the #1 producer of macadamias in the world. Kenya, Malawi, and South Africa are planting a bunch of them. So is Mexico, Nicaragua, Costa Rica. I was talking to a gentleman maybe 5 years ago at the farmer's market in Santa Monica. Big guy, he was big. He was in charge of a government project in Kenya planting, so he told me, 5,000 acres of macadamia. That's a lot of wax.
But according to the internet, they're still not up to production. I mean, the demand exceeds production.
That's right. That's why the price is still up there. Supply and demand sets the price of everything. And the world nut, and we're competing with all the other nuts in the world because if you're eating nuts, you're eating nuts. Yeah, macadamia is the Cadillac of nuts, but everyone can't afford a Cadillac. A lot of folks want Volkswagen. So any nuts is a competition for macadamia. Maybe 10 years ago, Senator Inouye the senator from Hawaii, got our Department of the Interior to file a lawsuit against the Australians for dumping nuts in the United States and undercutting our Hawaiian production. And they contended that they were being government subsidized, so they were selling nuts for less than the cost of production. And they were found guilty of that. So the Australians said, whoops, we got to do something different. Well, they did some interesting things. They started, because labor is so expensive in that country, they would put their in-shell nuts in containers, ship them to China, have them crack them, separate them, bag them, and ship them back. And that was cheaper than having done in Australia. Well, an interesting thing happened on the way to the forum, right? As the Chinese were doing that, they started eating them. They liked that stuff. Oh my goodness. So they started buying them. They also found they could ship them from China just the same as they could ship them from Australia, so they didn't need to ship them back. Ship them over, let them crack them, separate them, bag them, and we'll ship them from there. So that's how China got involved in the macadamia industry.
Do they grow them there?
They sure do. They sure do. And they're growing more of them.
What about the oil? Is that used commercially?
It sure is. Macadamia is one of the highest quality oils you can get. The cosmetic industry wants it. The kitchen industry wants it. It's an oil that's actually better health-wise than olive oil. And it's got a higher flame point too. It's just expensive because there's not that much of it. Because I got to take grade #1 kernels and crunch them for oil because the price of oil isn't that high. So what they're pressing is junk. You know, those ones that this little stink bug's been after and the worms have been after. The oil's okay. You squeeze the oil out of it, run through a couple of filters, straight. So it's great oil.
Where does it come from? Hawaii?
Mostly Australia. They're the only ones. Hawaii has some too. There.
What's the chill factor on a macadamia tree?
Well, we like to say 28 degrees for about 4 hours. You want to know the chill factor. And that's an established tree, that's not a baby. But it depends on the health of the tree. We're saying about 105, you're stressing a tree on the desert. So if it's getting above that, you better be pouring water to that tree. And if your temperature goes below 28 and it lasts longer than 4 hours, you can figure you just lost your tree.
Freeze.
You know? So that's why you want to get, if you're figuring on buying a piece of property to grow macadamias, put a recording thermometer on it. That's a thermometer that actually records the temperature, the highs and lows, and just see what's there. One of the things I was doing with Paul Thompson, he thought that the rootstock would impart cold-heartedness to the soil, to the top. He believed that. And there was a tree where they built the Fallbrook High School, and it withstood, it was a very cold piece of property. And it had withstood several really bad freezes. So before they bulldozed it out for the school, he went over and made arrangements. He took that tree, dug the tree out, brought it to his place and planted it. And so he propagated a bunch of seedlings. I bought them from him, we put them on my property, and we grafted Kates on them. Haven't had a free since, I don't know. I don't know whether that's true. Those seedlings really can take a freezer, I can tell you that. They don't make very good nuts, but they make good. So we'll see. One of these days I'll get a hard freeze and I'll see what's out there. Yes? Anybody else? I think maybe we can wrap it up then. Thanks for having me. Maybe if you want to put this on your raffle table, you can do that.
Thank you very much, Jim. I've just been handed the results. We have a new board. So when I call your name, I'd like you to come forward and I'd like you to meet your new board. Tom Del Hotel, come on up. Jim Neitzel, Joy Blackus, Marciello.
Thank you very much. I hope we can do right by you. You know, Claire wrote a very nice article about the history of the CRFG and hopefully brought a lot of people up to speed on what the organization used to be. Today, we're not the same organization. We have chapters, we have projects, we have events, we have a lot of really fun things that go on that make this organization what it is today. And thanks to the board that has been with us this past year, thank you very much for a great year and fun things that happened. I hope we can build on that and move forward, an organization that dwells in the past or stays stagnant is destined to die. And it's all about learning, building, growing, and I hope that's what we can do this next year. So I'm going to ask for a lot of participation from you. We have a lot of real fun things that are going to go on. I can't do it alone. I'm a very busy fellow. But hopefully we can all work together to make this organization something that our founders like Paul Thompson and Peggy Winter and Jim Neitzel and John Riley and all the people that put their heart and souls into this organization for so many years can be proud of. It's something that our children can be proud of, and it'll move on into the future with them. So thank you very much. We're going to have a great year. Thank you to the past board. Hope anyone else has something to say?
We're just very excited, and we really are looking forward to the beginning of a new year, and we look forward to getting to know a lot of our new members and getting you guys involved, and hopefully we could live up to the reasons why you joined CRFG.
And thank you very much for voting me in, and I have a request from our members. I love this Asian pear. I bought it at the Zion Market. I asked them what variety it was so I could buy the tree. They just said, it's the Asian pear variety. So if any of you recognize it or think you have a clue what it might be, please come tell me so I can write it down in research. Because this is the sweetest Asian pear I've ever tasted, and it's pretty moist. So I'd really appreciate if one of you could let me know what it is. Thank you.
Can we taste it?
One last thing before it breaks up, please. I wanted to let everybody here know that I believe in participation. And I'll be holding our first board meeting, our first event board meeting on December 2nd here in Casa del Prado, room 104.
Yes.
And would like to invite anyone who wants to come and have a voice or see what's going on to come. I have a tentative agenda of what I want to cover during that meeting. It's unofficial and not real structured for the first board meeting, just a starting point. So if anybody would like to come on December 2nd, room 104 at 6:30 p.m., I am going to keep it down to no more than 2 hours max. And probably less than that if I can. But I welcome anybody who'd like to come. December 2nd, room 104 here. All right.
Question in the back. Was that you, Ron?
I'd like everyone to clap for the past board. I think they did a tremendous job.
Thank you. I know I'm excited about the future of the club, and the fruit tasting table is open, so let's go at it.
If you want to see what we're going to cover at the board, I do have